For millennia, the world's most formidable empires repeatedly succumbed to the very same fatal delusion. Time and again, they marched onto the Iranian plateau, swords drawn, absolutely convinced they possessed the power to permanently erase this ancient civilization from the face of the earth. The disciplined Macedonian phalanxes of Alexander the Great invaded here, leaving their mark. Ruthless Roman legions also advanced through these lands. Arab armies, unified under the banners of a new religion, swept in with transformative force. And the ferocious Mongol hordes of Genghis Khan tore through, leaving behind nothing but grim towers of skulls in their wake. Any other nation, after enduring such a catastrophic series of blows, would have vanished permanently, dissolving into the genetic and cultural melting pot of history, to just as it happened with the Babylonians, the Hittites, or the Assyrians. But with Iran, something entirely inexplicable, a true enigma, unfolded. Time and time again, despite suffering crushing defeats on the battlefield, losing their capitals, and enduring prolonged occupations, the Iranians accomplished something no one else in the world could do. They subtly, yet profoundly, absorbed their conquerors. Just a few decades would pass, and these once brutal invaders would begin speaking the Persian language, erecting magnificent Persian architecture, adopting the intricate Persian state bureaucracy, and even donning Persian clothing. Again and again, the East essentially digested the West and the nomadic forces that sought to subdue it. How has Iran managed, from antiquity right up to the present day, to compel every major world power to reckon with its unique resilience? How did they so steadfastly preserve their distinct identity? And how did it come to pass that great Persia, a country with a 5,000-year history, voluntarily relinquished its legendary name, compelling the entire world to call it Iran? This is the extraordinary story of how a single nation invented the concept of linear time we operate within today, transformed geopolitics into a holy war between light and dark, and ingeniously learned how to lose battles in order to ultimately win eternity. To truly grasp the immense depth and complexity of this civilization, we need to journey far back in time. Traditionally, the Western world considers Mesopotamia, encompassing Sumer and Babylon, or ancient Egypt, to be the singular cradle of civilization. And in this prevailing worldview, Iran is all too often sidelined, which constitutes a massive historical injustice. Here, evolution took its natural, intricate course. As far back as 50,000 years ago, Neanderthals dominated these lands, only to be succeeded by Cro-Magnons some 36,000 years ago. However, the real revolution, the emergence of structured societies, began much later. Archaeologists have unearthed evidence of urban-type settlements on Iranian territory, such as the sophisticated Geruft culture and the imposing Sek ziggurat, dating back an astonishing 6,000 to 7,000 years. Furthermore, ceramic vessels discovered from the 4th millennium BCE irrefutably demonstrate that one of the planet's oldest and most advanced civilizations evolved right here, standing shoulder to shoulder with the contemporaneous cultures of Mesopotamia and China. The first major geopolitical player in these lands was Elam, a powerful state situated in the southwest of modern Iran, with its capital in the illustrious city of Susa. The Elamites were so formidable that by the 26th century BCE, they were practically dictating their will to the Sumerians. But perhaps the most mind-blowing event occurred in the 23rd century BCE, when the Akkadian king Naram-Sin engaged in war with Elam. This conflict didn't conclude with a simple truce. Instead, a remarkably detailed written treaty was signed. It guaranteed Elam's independence on the significant condition that they aligned their foreign policy with Akkad. Consider the profound implications of this. This document represents the first documented international treaty in the entire sweep of human history. The Iranian sphere thus stood at the very origins of global diplomacy and interstate relations. Genetically, however, the Elamites were more closely related to the people of Mesopotamia. The people we identify as Iranians today arrived here later, sometime between the 20th and 15th centuries BCE, when nomadic tribes began their descent onto this mountainous plateau from the north, specifically from the vast steppes of Central Asia and the Caucasus. They belonged to the giant family of Indo-European nations, representing its distinct Indo-Iranian branch. Amazingly, their ancient language was a direct linguistic relative of Latin, Greek, and the diverse languages spoken across all of Europe today, including English and Spanish. Upon settling on these fertile lands, they began to proudly call themselves Aryans, a term signifying noble, and named their new homeland Aranimva, meaning the land of the Aryans. Over time, this foundational word organically morphed into the familiar name we know today as Iran. They intermingled with the ancient culture of Elam and subsequently split into powerful tribal alliances, the most famous and influential of which became the Medes and the Persians. It was precisely here, amidst these harsh mountains and unforgiving deserts, that the primary weapon of the Iranians was forged and refined. It was not the swift chariots, nor was it special bows renowned for their power. It was instead a potent ideology. While long before the emergence of Christianity and Islam, a groundbreaking religion was born on the Iranian plateau that profoundly turned human consciousness upside down: Zoroastrianism. For the ancient Iranian, life was not merely a series of meaningless accidents or a cyclical changing of seasons. The entire universe was perceived as the eternal battlefield of a total, uncompromising war between Ahura Mazda, the transcendent god of light, truth, and order, and Ahriman, the spirit of absolute evil, lies, and darkness. And most importantly, Zoroastrianism vividly mapped the geography of this evil. The realm of darkness was considered to be the vast, nomadic expanse of Eurasia, Tron, from which devastating raids were constantly launched. To be Iranian, therefore, meant to be a warrior of light. Their entire culture, their exquisite poetry, and their very statehood were built upon the foundational idea of actively assisting the forces of good in this cosmic struggle. This profound concept endowed the nation with phenomenal unity and purpose. But Zoroastrianism accomplished something even more massive and transformative. This tradition was the first in recorded history to declare that time does not move in a circular fashion. Instead, time is fundamentally linear. The world, it asserted, had a distinct beginning, a moment of creation, and it will have an inevitable end. A final battle between light and dark, a purification of the world by fire, and ultimately, a last judgment. But how exactly did this groundbreaking idea come to conquer the world and shape our understanding of existence? When the Persians conquered Babylon in the 6th century BCE, they famously liberated the Jews, who were languishing there in captivity. Judea then became a province of the vast Persian Empire for 2 centuries. During this extended period of close cultural and religious contact, Jewish thinkers profoundly adopted from the Zoroastrians the revolutionary culture of anticipating the end of times, the concept of linear time itself, and the belief in a final judgment. Later, this highly influential doctrine organically flowed into the nascent traditions of Christianity and Islam, fundamentally shaping their eschatological beliefs. Prominent philosophers, including Friedrich Nietzsche, openly acknowledged that Iran played the pivotal role in discovering and formalizing linear time, the very coordinates within which we still think and perceive reality today. And the first truly great state of the Aryans was Media, which coalesced and formed around 670 BCE. The Medes did not last long as an independent power, but they managed to achieve the formidable feat of destroying the formidable Assyrian Empire. Their hegemony, however, was cut short by their own relatives, the Persians. In 550 BCE, a visionary man named Cyrus the Great, who was half Persian and half Mede, successfully united his two peoples, the tribes of the Persians and the Medes. Out of this powerful union, he began building what historians would later call the Achaemenid Empire, recognized as the first true superpower in recorded history. Cyrus was remarkably different from the tyrannical rulers of the past. When conquering territories such as Lydia, the Greek city-states of Asia Minor, or even mighty Babylon, and he did not destroy their temples, nor did he enslave their populations. Instead, he built an empire founded on respect and cultural tolerance. His successor, Darius I, further expanded the empire's borders from Egypt all the way to the Indus Valley. Nearly 50 million people, an astonishing half the population of the earth at that time, lived under Persian rule. Darius brilliantly divided the vast country into 20 administrative districts called satrapies, introduced a unified tax system, minted standardized gold coins known as darics, and laid down an extensive network of roads along which the fastest state postal service in the ancient world raced, ensuring swift communication across his realm. Yet, history is unforgiving of perceived weakness. In a daring attempt to secure the empire from the nomadic darkness to its north, our Cyrus the Great ventured into Central Asia to wage war against the formidable Massagetæ tribe. And there, the greatest emperor met his end. The ensuing battle was so brutal that the Persian army was virtually annihilated. According to Herodotus, the fierce leader of the Massagetæ, Queen Tomyris, seeking revenge for the death of her son, ordered her men to find the body of Cyrus. She then notoriously cut off his head and threw it into a leather sack filled to the brim with human blood, declaring, "You thirsted for blood, now drink your fill." Despite this profound tragedy, the empire lived on, resilient and vast. We are accustomed to thinking that the famous Greco-Persian wars, the ones immortalized by the 300 Spartans, crushed the Persians. This, however, is largely a Western myth, romanticized and propagated through time. Yes, the Greeks valiantly defended their independence. But for the colossal Achaemenid Empire, losing a couple of fringe cities was akin to little more than a mosquito bite. The Persians simply changed tactics, demonstrating their strategic flexibility. They began cunningly funding first Athens, then Sparta, effectively pitting the Greek city-states against each other in a prolonged, debilitating struggle. Ultimately, in 387 BCE, the exhausted Greeks were compelled to sign a humiliating treaty on the terms dictated by the Persian king Artaxerxes. What the Persians could not seize through a massive army, they expertly acquired through diplomacy and financial leverage. Persia thus became the undisputed master of Greece, without firing a single shot in direct combat. The real catastrophe for the Achaemenid Empire came later. The empire had grown to such massive proportions that a weak central government could no longer effectively control dozens of disparate nations and cultures. A young, ambitious king from Macedonia, Alexander, skillfully took advantage of this burgeoning weakness. In 330 BCE, the Macedonian phalanxes ruthlessly crushed the Persian army, utterly destroying their resistance. Alexander famously burned the magnificent Persepolis to the ground. It seemed the thousand-year history of Iran was irrevocably finished. From the ruins of the Achaemenids arose the Hellenistic Seleucid state, firmly ruled by Greeks. And that is precisely when the unique Iranian survival mechanism kicked into full gear. Eastern culture began to methodically, subtly, yet powerfully devour its Western conquerors. Alexander himself started adopting Persian clothes and even embraced Persian court etiquette. The policy of Hellenization, meant to impose Greek culture, choked on the thick, ancient Iranian worldview. In the 3rd century BCE, the Parthians, a robust Indo-Iranian tribe, successfully expelled the Greeks and established the formidable Parthian Empire. The Parthian ruler Mithridates I proudly proclaimed himself King of Kings and the legitimate successor to the Achaemenids. For 5 long centuries, the Parthians, relying on their highly mobile cavalry and the famous Parthian shot, successfully stood their ground against the mighty Roman Empire itself, dealing crushing defeats to its legions in the Middle East. Then, in the year 224 CE, a new golden age dawned with renewed vigor. The Sasanian dynasty took power, hailing from the Fars region, the very homeland of the first Persians. They created a fiercely centralized state where Zoroastrianism was re-established as the official state doctrine. Society was rigidly divided into strict castes: priests, warriors, bureaucrats, and commoners, all theoretically establishing an ideal meritocracy. Sasanian Iran was a superpower that waged grueling wars for almost 400 years, first with the Roman Empire and then with Byzantium, vying for control over Mesopotamia and the Caucasus. However, these centuries of endless warfare ultimately bled Iran dry, depleting its resources and manpower. By the mid-7th century, the Sasanian Empire was a bleeding giant, vulnerable and weakened. A new, unprecedented force emerging from the deserts of the Arabian Peninsula capitalized on this vulnerability: the burgeoning Arab Caliphate. In 651 CE, the Persian capital fell, and the last Shah of the Sasanian dynasty was treacherously murdered, effectively ending an era. All of Iran subsequently fell under Arab rule, marking the beginning of the era of the Umayyad Caliphate. The Arabs brought with them a new religion, Islam, and a new language, Arabic. Zoroastrianism, which had passionately fueled the Iranian spirit for millennia, began to visibly fade under this new dominance. For any other culture, this profound shift would have meant the total erasure of identity, just as it happened with Egypt or Syria, which became permanently Arabized in both language and culture. But the Persians, defying all odds, did it again. Various Arab rulers relentlessly tried to force the Persians to completely abandon their ancient roots. Yet, having suffered military defeat, the Iranians struck back with an equally potent cultural force. The Islamic Caliphate, especially during the sophisticated Abbasid period, began to rely heavily on the refined administrative skills of Persian bureaucrats, the profound wisdom of its scholars, and the sublime artistry of its poets. Arab caliphs readily adopted Persian methods of governance and courtly etiquette. The Farsi language did not merely survive. It triumphantly outlived dozens of empires, and the greatest scientific treatises and most exquisite poems continued to be written in it, a testament to its enduring power. After the Arabs, a true apocalypse descended upon Iran. In the year 1220 CE, Genghis Khan arrived from the vast steppes of Central Asia, unleashing his terrifying Mongol hordes. The Mongols did not just conquer territories. They systematically slaughtered entire cities and wiped thousand-year-old irrigation systems off the face of the earth, threatening to turn fertile lands into barren pastures. It seemed Iran would irrevocably turn into nothing more than a pasture for nomads. But when Genghis Khan's grandson, Hulegu, founded a Mongol state here called the Ilkhanate, something truly incredible happened. These harsh conquerors, accustomed to living in simple yurts, suddenly embraced Islam. They made the Persian language the official language of the state. They began building grandiose Persian mosques adorned with exquisite blue domes and generously funded local scholars and poets, sparking a new cultural flourishing. At the end of the 14th century, history eerily repeated itself. Tamerlane stormed into these lands, leaving a trail of devastation, famously erecting pyramids out of severed human heads. Yet, at the very same time, he stood in awe of Persian culture, revering its sophistication. He took the best Iranian artisans back to his capital, Samarkand, and his descendants, the Timurids, sparked a true Persian renaissance, transforming their courts into vibrant centers of exquisite miniature painting and profound poetry. For almost 300 years, Iran was a boiling cauldron, where political power belonged to fearsome Mongols and Turks. But upon taking the Iranian throne, within a couple of generations, they irrevocably became Persians, assimilated into the dominant culture. The Iranian cultural code completely reprogrammed its invaders, absorbing them into its ancient mold. And then, out of this 300-year cauldron of diverse tribes and warring dynasties, a visionary man named Shah Ismail emerged in 1501. He successfully reunited the country and founded the powerful Safavid state. It was the Safavids who, with strategic foresight, made Shia Islam the official state religion of Iran, forever separating it culturally and politically from the rest of the predominantly Sunni Islamic world, including the powerful Ottoman Empire. Iran once again forged its rigid, unique, and defiant identity. By the 19th century, under the Turkic Qajar dynasty, Iran entered a period of severe crisis and decline. Following devastating wars with the Russian Empire, the country permanently lost the significant territories of modern-day Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. By the early 20th century, on the eve of the First World War, Iran had become a mere backdrop for the Great Game, the intense geopolitical standoff between the rival British and Russian empires. The country was effectively carved into spheres of influence. Its sovereignty diminished. The British aggressively pumped Iranian oil, while Russian troops maintained a formidable presence in the north. Later, the nascent Soviet Union even tried to create a communist republic in northern Iran, further undermining its autonomy. The country was suffocating under the immense weight of colonial powers and foreign interference. But Iran would not be Iran if it didn't ultimately find a way out of such dire circumstances. In 1925, Reza Shah Pahlavi came to power as the result of a military coup, ushering in a new era. He boldly charted a hardline course toward rapid industrialization and ambitious modernization. And in 1935, he made a pivotal move that profoundly shook global diplomacy. For centuries, the entire Western world had referred to this country as Persia. This word, derived from the Greek name for the Fars region, was often associated in Europe with romanticized fairy tales, exquisite carpets, perceived backwardness, and exoticism. Reza Shah declared, "Enough." He dispatched an official directive to all embassies worldwide. From now on, the country must be called by its true, ancient name, the very one they had called themselves for millennia, Iran, the land of the Aryans. This was not just a linguistic whim or a superficial change. It was a profound political and cultural statement. It declared, "We are not an exotic colony to be romanticized or exploited. We are a modern, powerful nation with deep, ancient roots, and you will reckon with us on our own terms." The history of Iran is perpetually a history of radical pivots and astonishing transformations. In the 20th century, the country found itself precariously positioned on the global chessboard. caught between the competing interests of superpowers. Decades of political turbulence, internal struggles, and relentless foreign interference ultimately led to the country exploding in the Islamic Revolution of 1979. The monarchy fell, Iran became a theocratic republic, and relations with the West were abruptly severed. And today, we witness a stunning historical paradox. In the mind of modern man, two completely different states of being exist simultaneously. The word Iran typically triggers in most people images of geopolitical tension, harsh sanctions, ongoing conflicts, and grim news reports. Meanwhile, the word Persia, ironically, has not vanished at all. It has instead acquired a romantic, almost mythical aura. Persia is now associated with lost grandeur, refined poetry, magical flying carpets, and enchanting fairy tale empires. Two names, one land, and a constant, relentless struggle over exactly how it will be remembered by the world. Over its 5,000-year history, this unique culture developed the ultimate mechanism for survival. When clashing with Macedonians, Arabs, or Mongols, they did not disappear. Instead, they absorbed their conquerors, subtly reshaping them to fit their own profound cultural mold. They stood at the origins of civilization and, remarkably, invented the concept of time in which we live today. But perhaps their greatest battle, their most profound struggle, is taking place right now. Because sometimes, hidden behind the simple name of a country, is a quiet, invisible war. A war between who we were in the past, who we are today, and how the world ultimately wants to see us.